All right, hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Just a Girl from Cleveland. This is episode 160. Please mind my voice throughout this recording. It actually, at least for the moment, knock on wood, sounds a little bit better. I've been drinking tea nonstop the last 3 days, trying to get in better shape to record, so bear with me. The Cleveland Guardians stole my voice from me from so much excitement. It was completely gone on Sunday, could not say a word. Doing a little bit better today, but there might be some cracks, so just be aware of that, especially if you're listening to audio only. I will be drinking tea periodically throughout to keep myself going through all of this because there is quite a bit to discuss today. Lots to get into, but I'd like to start with the Guardians because I just need to talk about how magical the experience of being at the ALCS games was this weekend. So I went to the first and third home games. That was game 3 and game 5. I was not at game 4. And going to game 3 has to be maybe second on my list to the experience, the euphoria I felt of winning game 7, 2016 NBA Finals. Like, this might come next on the list of being there in person, because obviously I was not there in person for game 7 of the 2016 finals, but this experience I did get to be in the ballpark for, the back and forth in that game, going up, going down, going up, going down, like just heart-wrenching every time where you think you're out of it and they pull you right back in. The John Kenzie homer that, just rocked the entire ballpark, and then for David Fry to finish things off with his homer. It's a feeling that I don't know if I could explain fully or will ever be able to replicate unless one of my teams wins a championship that I'm there in person for. But it's just like the way this game happened was so otherworldly. It was so fun to be there. Obviously, things didn't go our way in the series, but I am so proud of those guys for just fighting and staying in every single game. I think going down 4-1 doesn't truly show how competitive they were in the series and how close every single game was, repeatedly mounting these comebacks throughout games, or at least hanging in them, was really special to watch, and I'm really proud of them for that. I think it was a against all odds situation. Obviously, everyone talks about the salary caps of all those teams. You've got the Mets with $350 million, Dodgers $340, Yankees $315, and then you have the Guardians sitting there at $140 million, basically having the salary cap of one entire player on some teams, and that they were able to do that, against all of those odds is really special. I think it was so joyful too for me to see how happy and grateful the players were. Grateful to be there, grateful to be on this team, grateful for the fans, that it was just such a joyous and moment, an environment to be in overall. Stephen Kwan talked about this in his Players Tribune article before the playoffs started, kind of just about how Cleveland will give you unwavering love and support if they can see that you're putting the work in and that you're out there giving it your all. And I think that's a perfect segue into the other Cleveland sports team that we need to discuss today. Such a contrast from our sweet little Cleveland Guardians to the, I don't even know how to describe it, of what the Cleveland Browns season has become. So obviously this Sunday is as insane as it probably could have been, or what I could have expected in my mind. Tensions were high going into the game. I obviously talked about that on this podcast, that I didn't think it was wise to put Deshaun Watson out there in front of such a hostile environment that was already very upset with him for various reasons, and putting him out in front of a home crowd when he had not, this team hadn't been home in many weeks at that point, just didn't seem like a very smart decision to me. So they started off with the player intros and practically hid Deshaun Watson within Nick Chubb's intro. Deshaun went out right before him, and then immediately you can see the screen change to this like compilation of Nick Chubb, so that the boos would stop quickly. It was really awkward to watch because the boos were definitely still there, and then it quickly turned to a obviously massive applause for Nick Chubb, everyone's favorite guy, the most likable guy possible, throwing him in there right after. I thought that was, it was obviously intentional. And look, I'm sure the people who have to conduct that business in the stadium, they have a job to do, and that is part of it. So I understand, but it was just, it was funny kind of in a way to watch that. And really, I think kicked off the day in an interesting way for what was to come. So to give you some thoughts about just the game overall before I get into the Deshaun injury of it all, I thought the defense looked good. I believe Joe Burrow actually said it was one of the toughest defenses that they played this entire season so far. And look, obviously 7 of the Bengals' points were from that kick return on the opening play of the game. So the offense, the Bengals offense did struggle with the Browns defense a lot throughout the game. And, the Browns defense sure had their errors, but overall, I think they played one of their better games of the season. So that was nice to see. Obviously, good to see Nick get in the end zone there. I was like, just get him in at any cost. Please let that man score a touchdown. Such a bright spot in the game. Twitter erupted with like every single fan base being like, good for Nick Chubb. Every other player being like happy for that guy. Like truly the most likable guy in the league. I think everyone wanted to, see him out there doing good things after everything he has gone through to come back. I talked about his Players Tribune article last week and how moving that was and everything that he has talked about going through to get to this point. It was really special to see him in a Browns uniform, getting in the end zone, scoring a touchdown. Really, really happy for him. When Jameis and DTR were both in the game, I thought there were some bright moments for each of them. I thought DTR's first throw was absolutely beautiful. I was like really caught off guard. I was like, wow, that was a great throw. Didn't matter, but it was still a beautiful throw. And I think he started off kind of strong and kind of had some worse moments as his performance went on before he got injured and Jameis came in. Look, Jameis looks like a guy who could run this offense. Obviously, the Bengals had kind of stopped trying once he was in, so it's hard to get a full evaluation of him, but I feel more promising with Jameis out there than I have felt this whole season. Same old story with penalties, weird, bizarre offensive line play. All of that continued. You had that shot of Jedrick Wills just like standing there with his hands out, just like completely confused, kind of shrugging when he let a guy just get past him. I have no idea what happened there, but that was really emblematic of the offensive line for this season and how they've been functioning. Just we knew that was going to continue no matter what, so saw a lot more of that once again this week. Had to take a sip before we get into the next part, which is to get into the Deshaun Watson injury. I think that's the rest of what I just said is kind of all I have to say about the rest of the game. This is kind of the meat and potatoes that we have to talk about today anyways. Okay, so to get into the injury here, I kind of want to take it back to just go through my experience with Deshaun Watson being the quarterback of the Browns, especially for those who have not listened to this podcast for very long or weren't listening back then. Maybe this is the first episode you've ever listened to. I have no idea, but gonna take you through my experience as a Browns fan with Watson as the quarterback and the acquisition of him as the quarterback. So obviously, back when this move was made over 2 years ago, I did not want the Browns to make this trade from the very beginning. I was comfortable moving on from Baker, which I've explained in length many, many times on this podcast, and we'll not get into that today. But I certainly was not comfortable with moving on to Deshaun Watson. I had a lot of other people I would have been much more interested in moving on to, one being like Kirk Cousins. I was on board for that. I was on board for many other guys at that point in time, was not on board and on the train for Deshaun Watson. When the trade was made, it's one of those I will remember where I was in my apartment forever about that. Like, I couldn't even leave my apartment that night. I was so upset. I legitimately cried, which probably sounds dramatic, but I actually cried. I was sad that a front office and a coaching staff that I fiercely defended and believed in would compromise on everything that I thought they believed in to get this guy. Obviously, the large amount of guaranteed money didn't help either, especially at that moment in time. That was a shocking amount of money to see in a contract in general, let alone a guaranteed amount of money. So that made things really complicated as well. I was also sad because I knew that this was going to change everything for Browns fans and that things were never going to be the same. Many people who have been a part of this community were not going to be a part of this community anymore. I was sad because as someone who's pursued a passion of talking about football and specifically the Cleveland Browns on this podcast, on other publications, that things were going to be a lot harder for me when talking about the team as well. Look, I know lots of people who flipped teams, but for me, that was never a question. Cleveland sports are so deeply rooted in my blood. It does not matter who the owner, the front office, the coach, any player is on a team. It matters so much to me and my family that I do not think it would be possible for me to love another team outside of the city. Like, I can enjoy other football games. I can put any football game on and enjoy it and probably have a team that I'm rooting for more. But even, when the Browns were 0-16, there's something about rooting for the team that in the town you grew up in the town that's connected to your family, with the team that's connected to your family, that feels different and I wouldn't be able to scratch. My parents' first date was at a Cavs game, and so much of their enjoyment together in life has been them watching Cleveland sports together, traveling to Cleveland sporting events together. I love texting them on Sundays or any day of the week talking about the Browns or the Cavs or the Guardians. It's in my DNA, and it's such an important part of my life. And I knew I couldn't give it up, but I also knew it was going to be very uncomfortable for me, and there were a lot of things I was going to have to think about. And I just remember having no clue how I was going to do it, because you really can't avoid talking about the quarterback. It's such an important part of the game. If it was a random offensive lineman, if it was a linebacker, if it was a kicker, it's way easier to avoid talking about those players when you're talking about the game. You can find ways to do it. When it is the quarterback of your team, it's impossible. It's an impossible task. And as someone who could only dream of having a career in this field, I really wanted to be respected for my football knowledge and wanted to do the best I could to be honest about the play on the field, regardless of my emotions. I've spent so much time trying to learn more and more about the game and become a smarter player so that, that there could be the potential for me someday to pursue talking about football at a larger level. And like I said, I really wanted to be respected for that. So I was taking that into account as well. I ended up taking some inspiration from Mina Kimes' podcast, and I believed I talked about that on here at that time. She vocally expressed anger about Deshaun Watson, the person, while also saying kind of like this is how she was going to handle talking about things on a podcast where she talks about the NFL. So when you're talking about the play on the field, you can talk about the play on the field. When you're talking about Deshaun, the person or his contract or his mindset or any issues in the organization, you need to talk about the sexual assault cases because of all of those things really shaping the story of Deshaun Watson, the person. It's important to do those cases justice and to do the situation justice and talk about it when you're talking about Deshaun and in any of those type of categories. But when you're talking about X's and O's and the offensive scheme and how he's doing within that, you can talk about the play on the field. So given all that, for the last 2+ years, that is what I've tried to do. And I want to say I am not perfect. I'm sure I've missed the mark many times, and I really did the best that I could to stand up for what I believe is right, while also giving a proper analysis of the game and the team that I love. I felt it would be a disservice to the other players on the roster to not speak about the play on the field honestly. And that meant complimenting the play when necessary or criticizing the play when necessary. I question myself so many times, like, are you handling all of this the right way? Are there things you can do better? Like, is this the way you want to be, conducting yourself through all of this. And to go back to the part about, doing a disservice to the other players on the roster, I did always feel like it was unfair when I would listen to national podcasts and they would not speak a word about the Browns because of their disdain for Deshaun Watson. And I get it to an extent, but when you've got a guy like Nick Chubb fighting back to get back out on that field, you've got guys like, Myles Garrett, who have been veterans in that locker room, Denzel Ward, good people on that team, to just not talk about them. It felt like that was a disservice to those players and was unfair to them, because they don't get to choose who their coworkers are, just like none of us get to choose that. And I wanted to make sure I was doing them justice because I felt like that was important as well when discussing the game. And look, I know I'm getting deep here with everything and a little philosophical, but I care about being a good person. And I think it's important to have good people in football, especially considering the history of harm done to women that has not been taken seriously by this league for generations. I think it's important to have good people in the space who are willing to call it out and talk about it. Even if I am also talking about X's and O's, I still wanted to be a person who was going to talk about those things. And I tried to do that. Like I said, even if I wasn't perfect or missed the mark at times, I really tried to be that within the Browns content space. So all of these feelings for, like I said, the last 2+ years are in my head when I'm laying on my couch on Sunday. I was not at the game, I was laying on my couch watching this game, and I see Deshaun Watson go down with what we later learned was an Achilles injury. Now on the TV, I could tell that pretty quickly. I think people watching on the TV could tell with that pop. In the stadium, it's a little bit different, but I think we all knew it was bad pretty immediately. And my jaw was on the floor for probably 5 minutes. I was just kind of like, what just happened? What did I just watch? After weeks of calling for him to be benched, I don't think I could have ever projected that would happen, for him to get injured at all. I don't know why that wasn't in my mind. He's an injury prone player in the past, but for some reason I was just, more focused on they need to bench him. I wasn't thinking that an injury could or would happen, let alone such a serious injury that would have him out for the next year. And just a couple of thoughts I want to give about the perspective from people I talked to that were in the stadium as we get into the discussion of cheering for the injury. So number one is that there were a lot of Bengals fans at that game participating greatly in the booing. So that was an additional aspect that I don't really feel like I've seen being talked about. Number two, people in that stadium obviously did not know the severity of the injury until the cart came out. You really can't see those things when you're in a stadium. It's hard when you're from that far of a distance. They're usually not replaying all of those things on the scoreboard. So you're just not always fully aware of what's happening. I think it was clear to us all on the TV, but unless you were scrolling on social media while at the game, you might have thought, I don't know, he just hurt his leg a little bit, was going to bounce back and go back in. Who knows? People did not fully know the extent of that until I would say the cart came out. And the third thing is, look, not all people by any means, but some of the cheers were supportive cheers as the cart was going away, which is a very common practice in sports, that for when someone is getting rolled away on a cart, you cheer for them as kind of like a support, like, hey, you're going to be okay, that sort of vibe. So I just want to give some of that context for those who think the whole stadium was just like these malicious, horrible people erupting in joy at someone's downfall. I think there's a lot of missing context to that hasn't been discussed. And look, I am not a cheer for an injury type of person. But understanding how we got here after the last few years and everything I just described to you about all of my emotions, I can certainly understand why there are people in that stadium who wouldn't be very upset by that particular man's injury in that moment. Also, I know it's a serious injury, but I think some people are starting to act like he died on the field. He's going to be fine. It's obviously hinders his ability to play football. But look, he is, like I said, alive. He has a whole lot of guaranteed money. He's got all the best doctors in the world. We just saw Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers come back from Achilles injuries this year, so he very well could play football again. So I need to remind people of that when they're acting like people are erupting that someone like died on the field. That is not the case. And I know to a lot of players, an injury does feel like a death. I get that because it is such a important thing, but I do think, there is a difference between injury and death, and we need to be aware of that. To see players after the game like Jameis and Miles come out and condemn the fans, it was honestly one of the most insulting things I've seen. I know there is a brotherhood, like I said, in the locker room. You're going to defend your guys. You're going to have your guys' backs. I get that. But the extra steps they took in these monologues that they gave was it was upsetting to me. You can say, I don't think he should have gotten booed. I wish him a speedy recovery. Don't wish that on anyone in the league. That's my teammate. Without having to throw in these quotes about how he's been a model citizen for all of college and most of his professional career, which is a big stretch to say most of his professional career. You can say, that you don't support the booing without having to say, he's overcome a lot in his career and painting him out to be this martyr that everyone should have some more empathy for. I don't blame anyone if they don't have empathy for Deshaun or the Browns organization in this situation because they haven't earned that level of empathy. I've seen a lot of commentary about the fans in this situation, and I have to say a couple things in defense of the people in Cleveland. Like, there are bad eggs in every single fan base. Yes, you're going to find pictures of the idiots early on in Deshaun's first season who had the massage table in the Muni lot, or the people who held up those disgusting signs at games, like that one picture that always goes around of the dad who brought his son. I don't even remember what the sign said, but I know they were disgusting. People who say terrible things online, all of those things exist in the Cleveland Browns fan base. Yes, they also exist in every single fan base. That is not the majority. The majority of Browns fans just want a team to love on Sundays every year, and they want to be able to enjoy that team with their whole heart. The majority of fans felt very uncomfortable in acquiring Deshaun Watson, and on varying scales. Some people maybe were just like, oh, I don't love that. Some people, were like, I don't like this guy, and I'm leaving the fan base. So there was a wide range of how people felt, but there were a lot of people that were just like, you know what, I don't like him, but this is my team, a choice that the owners made that I don't have any control over, to get a perceived at the time top 5 talent. So I'm just going to have to power through, even though I really don't like it and I don't like this guy, but this is my team. So I'm going to keep rooting for my team. And look, you might be sitting there and saying, Abby, that's completely morally wrong to do that and not cut off the team entirely. And that's your prerogative. But I feel like most people feel really complicated about it, and we're never able to fully embrace Deshaun or this current team because of it. And I have a lot of empathy for that portion of the Browns fan base. And I don't think that portion of the Browns fan base is bad people. So to sit there on Sunday after the game and watching that specific quarterback that was promised to be all of those things to all of these fans give you the worst quarterback play in the league throughout the season, I can understand how your emotions get really heated in that moment. You're mad that your team made that trade in the first place because he's not a good player anymore, and quite frankly has not been a good player since he's been in Cleveland. You're mad that the organization put you in a place where you had to question your own morality, which is a really uncomfortable place to be. You're mad that the team, for some reason, wouldn't bench him, even though he was giving you the worst quarterback play in the league. And any other team that had that level of quarterback play would at least try someone else at that point in time. And also in that moment, you're a little excited when DTR is running out on that field at the prospect of getting to try something else and getting to really enjoy a quarterback with your whole heart for the first time in a while. Obviously we had Joe Flacco last season. We're able to enjoy that quarterback with your whole heart, and to have, Deshaun come back this year and have to feel so uncomfortable again. I think people were a little bit excited about that. Even if DTR's play wasn't going to be incredible, I think it felt good to fans that they could root for him and that they could say it with their chest, which they had not been able to do for much of the last 2 years. I know, additionally, the Jameis conversation brings up a lot of complicated points for people too, considering his history. So I do want to acknowledge that it's not, going to be sunshine and roses with him out there too. That's another player, obviously, with a tough history. But I think in that moment, seeing DTR start to warm up, I don't blame fans for rejoicing that the mess of this situation might be over, or that they could at least get away from it for a period of time. Obviously not knowing at the time, because nobody in the stadium knew how long it was going to be at that time. They were just like, well, man, for one moment we get to try someone else and maybe find some joy in all of this again. So look, now we end up in this place where we have players criticizing the fans for their morals. When I would have loved for just one player at some point in time to care about morals when it pertained to violence against women. They can't seem to ever speak about that, but are happy to give, like I said, a full monologue about the booing of an injury and defend their teammate by calling him a model citizen. I kind of roll my eyes at that, honestly. Like, spare me with your calls for empathy when we don't see any empathy the other way around. It's really hard to listen to the players and feel like they are justified in that. And then we have the national media on the other end, criticizing the fans, doing one of two different things. The one side is kind of criticizing the fans for cheering in a similar way to the players did, and saying, it's never right to do that. You can't behave like that in a stadium, disgusting fan base. Or two, people are saying that Browns fans are bad people for even cheering for the Browns in the first place, and are only cheering now that cheering at this injury now that, or booing during that intro because he's playing bad. And this is a disgusting group of people because they would root for the Browns who employ Deshaun Watson. So those are the two ways that the national media is going right now, which for number two, I understand, to some extent. Like, obviously poor play on the field is a part of the reason why fans are reacting so strongly right now, and that they haven't always reacted that strongly just because of, the off the field issues. But you can't tell me that it isn't amplified by like 100 because of the way people feel about Deshaun Watson, the person, and his contract with this team. It is certainly putting things on a different level because of all of that. But I think what I find interesting in all of that, those criticisms from fans, from the national media, is that this is the main conversation about the Deshaun Watson situation. It's not about the organization that employs him or the owner that gave him the money. The blame is now going on the backs of the fans, of the people in Cleveland. And it feels very classic Cleveland to me. Like, not to play the victim role here, but I'm really sick of the people in this, and honestly, not even just the NFL, any like category. It could be sports, it could be entertainment, anything, where Cleveland is the punching bag for everyone's jokes and insults. Most people here are good, hardworking people who are doing the best they can. And I'm sure Jimmy Haslam is feeling pretty good right now as he's working on, building his dome, and he's seeing everyone kind of ignore him and put all of their anger and all of their frustration on the fans in Cleveland instead. And like, again, I know there's bad people in the fan base with bad intentions who've said horrible and awful things in regards to this situation, but it's not the majority. And I would love for someone in the national media to acknowledge that instead of just pummeling on this group of people. So now we're here going into a game against the Ravens next week. The season it's over for this team. They're going to have to figure out how to rebuild for the future while taking a massive cap hit for Deshaun Watson. Should they definitely choose to move on from him, even if they keep him, obviously that's going to be even more complicated continuing to pay him while figuring out what their future is, because it's not going to be him. Jimmy Haslam's going to get his dome in Brook Park. I don't know what's going to happen with Kevin and Andrew Berry, but if either of their time is done in Cleveland, they're going to get a job somewhere else, because I think they're really respected across the league. And then what's left from all of this is the people in Cleveland having to watch yet another rebuild of their football team for the millionth time since I was 4 years old and this team came back in 1999 and the Browns returned to the city. Those are the people that are going to be here every single Sunday rooting on their team. And I am beyond frustrated for those people that they are in this position and that they're the ones getting clobbered right now rather than the people actually responsible for making the bad decisions in this situation. And like all of this might sound dramatic, especially to people who don't watch sports. They're like, okay, calm down, relax. But sports matter to people and football matters to people. I know a lot of people who have lost a parent at some point in their life. And the one thing that makes them still feel connected to that parent is cheering for their shared sports team every single weekend. And it allows their memories to live on. Like sports matter to a lot of people. This stuff matters to a lot of people. So you can say it's like frivolous, whatever, not a big deal, but it's important and it does impact people. I don't know where this team goes from here. I've talked about, how I don't think they necessarily need to draft someone in 2025. I think they could do a bridge quarterback situation and wait until they find a quarterback in the draft that they really, really love, that they, want to consider developing. I don't know if they will do that or what their plan is, in general. But I just want to say, like, as a Browns fan to other Browns fans listening, I'm sorry that this is where this team is at. I'm sorry that you had to be in a position where you felt like you were compromising on your morals for 2+ years. I know we're all doing the best we can and that our passion for our teams and for our city and the loyalty that we have is one of the best things about us, but also makes it one of the toughest places for players to play and just places to root for in general. I hope that sometime in our lives we'll be able to enjoy this team again, hopefully sooner rather than later. I'm sorry specifically to the women inside of Cleveland and outside of Cleveland who felt abandoned by this football team and either couldn't cheer for this team anymore or felt gross every time that they had to talk about it. And I'm sorry to any victim of sexual assault that you had to watch this circus go on for, the last couple of years within this league. I hope that in the future, the league can be better for you too. In all of my talking here about the fans and how they've been wronged in a lot of ways, I don't want it to get lost that there's a lot of actual victims in this situation. And I think that's important to remember. So my last sorry on everything that has gone on is definitely to that group of people as well. Sad note to have to, go through this episode, but I want to thank anyone who listens to this and has been a part of this community, especially throughout the whole Deshaun Watson saga of the last couple of years and kind of stuck with me as I navigated how to handle it all and talk about things the best way I could. Thanks for listening to my feelings on it. I hope I've, spoken for a lot of you as fans. I'm sure a lot of you will relate to a lot of the things I've said in this, as it's been a tough time to be a Cleveland Browns fan. Luckily this week we have our Cleveland Cavaliers back, which that's the best thing about having 3 professional sports in this city. There's always another team on deck next. Once your team makes you sad, the Guardians are out, the Browns are ruining our lives, but we got the Cavs back and that's something to look forward to. So shout out to being in a city that has 3 professional sports teams because it's very nice. So I'm excited to start getting back into all of that and we'll just keep going. So yeah, a little bit longer today, but had to go through all of that because I'm so disheartened by the way everything has gone down and wanted to make my feelings clear. So thanks all for listening. As usual, please leave me a review or rating on Apple, Spotify, subscribe, follow wherever you listen to podcasts, subscribe on the YouTube, leave a comment on the YouTube. Would very much appreciate it. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm not giving you a Go Browns this week because I feel like I always do, but it's not in my heart at this moment. I'm so frustrated. So I'll just say thanks for listening and have a good one.